Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 72. Today, my guest is David Sancious, and my co-host is Jez Graham. Good morning, David.
Hey, everybody seeing everybody?
Yeah, it looks like it's working.
Great.
I'd like to introduce you to my co-host. This is my good friend, Jez Graham. He's a local pianist,
Hi, Jez.
music
David,
historian.
Long-time fan of your work. Good to meet you.
My pleasure. Let me just get my volume here. There we go. Yeah, so good morning. I know what time it is for you guys, but it's morning here.
About 3 o'clock, about 10 o'clock for you there in Hawaii, is that right?
Back in 10 o'clock, yeah.
Okay. Which of the islands are you on?
Kauai.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful. How long have you been living out there?
Well, a year now. We just, January 29th was our 1-year anniversary of being here.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, that's awesome. That must be like living in paradise.
It is, man. We're really happy. My wife and I are incredibly happy. It's just been really good for both of us because we're sort of thriving in a challenging time, like sort of physically, and spiritually. But this is a great place to have a tough time.
I bet it is. Just like, lockdown in paradise, right? Not a bad way to go. So I was curious, what have you been up to as of late, musically and otherwise?
Musically and otherwise, I've really been focusing on promoting Eyes Wide Open, my last album. That's really, I have no concerts to do of any kind. So that's all I've been doing really is, and so it's a combination of a lot of publicity and luckily people seem to be interested in the project. I'm getting some really good reactions and good response from it, and it's actually being heard by people. So.
It's a wonderful album. I've been listening to it a lot, and I love how you have 5 different drummers and just the textures and the songwriting, and I actually have a couple questions about the process of how you do that. If you don't mind, I was wondering, do you put the drums on later? Do you finish the tracks and send them off to the drummers, or how does that work?
It's a combination of both things, but that record, I say song by song, the title track, the drum tracks were cut live, and they were for a session they were part of like a 3-day session with this Italian drummer, Adriano Molinari, who I met through working with Zucchero many years ago. So those tracks were done live, but that particular song, Eyes Wide Open, when he came and when we cut the song live, he was playing to a completely different song harmonically.
Okay.
And it was instrumental. It wasn't vocal. It wasn't in the key that it's in now. It didn't have any of the chords or melody. So I was working on the thing one day, and he'd already flown back home. And I liked everything about it except my part. I didn't like what I had sort of presented him with, like, musically, harmonically. It was a bit kind of like square in a way. But the drumming was too good to lose.
Yeah.
But the drumming is outstanding for him. So he plays on Eyes Wide Open and on Flip It. And Flip It again, that was live. That was just basically he and I in the studio same time.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And then everything else was overdubbed. I had overdub bass on it, some guitar and everything. But the basic tracks were cut keyboards and drums. The other example, so I'm going to say most of it's done that way. The tracks of Will Calhoun, that was us live in my studio doing the tracks for back in Woodstock.
Or you got to Hawaii.
Yeah. He's on Middle of the Night, that was live. Michael Bland plays on from Prince's band.
I was going to ask you about him, with him. He's one of my favorite drummers.
I met him working in 1996, working in Paris with a very famous French singer who's now deceased. Her name was France Gall. Okay. And she imported this band. She was really a big star in France and Europe since the age of 16. I think she's passed away last year. But this band she had myself, the drummer from Prince's band, Sonny Thompson, the bass player from Prince's band, the organ player from Stevie Wonder's band, Herman Jackson. It was really a great thing. So we just hit it off right away. And the same thing, when that project was over, I flew them out. I think they were living in Minneapolis. I flew them out and put them up for like about maybe 3-4 days, and we just recorded like crazy. And same thing, I just got basic tracks, live drums, and then I did overdubs. The last thing, the only other example like that is where I didn't have live drums was on If. So Vinnie Colaiuta's playing drums on that.
Yeah.
And what happened is he was going to do it for me a lot sooner. I think I started writing a song in 2018. And I think in 2018, I had some version of them that I wanted live drums on. So I worked to a loop. I found the funkiest loop I could find, right? Just giving the neighborhood of the kind of syncopation I wanted.
Yeah.
But he couldn't do it back then because he was injured. He was recovering from a knee injury, and he couldn't play at all for a bunch of months. He had to get over it. Okay. So I kept working on it. And finally, I got in touch with him. It was like the year later, summer of 2019. And he was able to do it. He heard it once. We had like the briefest of conversations about it, and he instantly knew what it was. And because he's so good at what he does, and because we both have the same sort of digital audio software, where we can share files back and forth, I defy anyone to tell me that wasn't cut live, that we weren't in the same room at the same time. The energy is crazy, especially in the end of If. When it does the whole chorus again, and he kicks in the fourth gear, and then it's just drums and guitar, and the chorus refrain. It's really, really exciting.
So you have the best of both worlds, because you got to be in a room with drummers that you love and feel that chemistry, but then you also got to feel the same chemistry with Vinny, and you weren't in the same room, but it sounds like you're.
Yeah. Cool. Again, that's down to his expertise and his passion. What's outstanding about Vinny is not just his technical ability, of course, but his tastefulness, like his ideas. Yeah. It's like what he plays and then what he doesn't play as well, Oh, yeah. It's amazing. So
yeah, we caught him. Sean, you might have been there at the Jeff Beck show a couple summers ago. It was like a power trio with a cellist.
With Tala Wilkenfeld?
Yeah. No, this was Rhonda, another Prince, another ex-Prince bass player.
Rhonda Smith. Yeah.
And it was really a nice open kind of a feel, and you got to hear Vinny really open up, and there was just a lot of space, and it was just really nice.
Yeah,
nice. It's always a treat to hear him play. Whatever context.
And all the drummers
with anybody,
but all the drummers on your album, though, I mean, all 5 of them are just phenomenal. And to see, when I read the credits and saw Michael Bland, I just perked up, because I just knew you guys would make some magic together. That tune, Urban Psalm, that's one of my favorites on the album.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool.
And can you remind us the best place to get the album at for anyone?
It's on Amazon Music. It's on Apple Music. It's on a format called Bandcamp. And where else? I'm always forgetting someplace. Our site is called The Orchard. Okay. But the most readily available ones, I mean, it's Amazon Music and Apple and those other things.
Excellent. Well, go get it, folks. Highly recommended.
Please.
Jez, did you have some more questions? I'll let you go first.
The vocals on that album, I don't have the credits in front of me, but are you singing some of those?
Yeah, that's me. I'm doing all the vocals.
Excellent job on the vocals.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, because I was used to, one of my favorite albums of yours, it's from a while back, True Stories. And I love that.
That was a big project.
I love that, just the vibe on that album, and the vocals. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Alex
Lidgertwood.
Yeah,
that was back in the day. That was thanks to the great Eddie Offord found Alex for us. Sure. Back when I was writing all that music and that band was together, I didn't want to really be the lead singer. I didn't have the vocal skills that I have now. That was a lot of years ago, and since that time, I worked with other singers and I studied it and practiced it, and I love to sing now. But I couldn't sing as well to pull that off, and I didn't have the vocal range that Alex has. And those songs were all written in certain keys. For instance, Matter of Time is in G major, right? So the beginning, the first 4 notes of that melody vocally, the first note is at the top of my vocal range in full voice. I couldn't even do the rest of the notes, and Alex just nailed it straight off. And he has such a rich kind of like lived in voice, just one of
very soulful. It was very soulful.
Yeah.
But would you ever consider doing any of that material now that you've expanded your vocal range? Would you sing any of those songs?
The answer is yeah. I've been thinking about how to do a kind of tone reunion with a slightly like Tone 2.0. It'll be slightly different ensemble. It would be myself and Ernest Carter for sure.
Good. Gotta have Ernest.
And it may be a different basis with what's her name? Gail Ann Dorsey.
Oh yeah, played with Bowie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's awesome.
Thinking about if Gail was able to do it, then what we would do would be we would share vocals and stuff. Then do some vocals, she would do some, and I think probably so that I can sort of easily go back and forth between keyboards and guitar, I might have another keyboard player as well.
That's a lot to carry all that stuff, the vocals and all those parts, and you could do it. I know. Ever the Same is one of my favorites on that album.
Yeah, thanks.
And the build up when the drum fill that brings it up out of that quieter, that's epic.
Right.
It's fantastic. I'd love to hear that live.
Could you tell us a bit about how you came to do your fusion albums with Tone? I think Forest of Feelings was the first one, but that was like a self-titled, and then you kind of let on, hey, this is my band, and this is what it's called.
I just had to tell the record company I wanted to do that. They signed me. I mean, we were together as a trio, but they didn't offer this a contract as a band. They were offering it to me as a solo artist and writer. So I did it like that, Force of Feelings, and then that was really, what it was. That led to a whole lot of other work for me, is what happened. After Force of Feelings came out, then people started contacting me, and that was the start of something. But then the band, I wanted it to be represented like that. It's me and the band. It's like, Bruce Springsteen and E Street Band.
You had experience with that.
Yeah, it was like
solo artist and band.
So that's really how it came to be, and it worked for a while. I mean, it started as a trio. Tone started as a duo with me and Ernest Carter down in Richmond, Virginia, and then we moved back to New Jersey because we had enough of the South back then, and then we found Jerry, and it was a trio for a while, and then. After I did that record, I wanted to have some female backing singers, and I wanted to be able to do that stuff live, So at the biggest we had 3 girls, Gail, Brenda, and Kate for a minute. So that was the biggest it was, and we only really did that. That bunch of musicians just did that album, because after that there was a big shift of stuff, and then the next thing I did was. True Story, Just As I Thought, I think, something like
the same basic lineup with the same section?
No, the band started shrinking then. We had to change the bass player. Sadly, and I don't want to reflect negatively on him at all, because he's a great guy and he played some great stuff. But around the time of Just As I Thought, I started writing pieces of music that the bassist was finding really hard to play. Really, and he just couldn't pull it off. So that's why I called Jeff Berlin and to do that song. I forget the name of it. Whatever that was. And he just ate that up like breakfast. It was no problem. And then again, for the lead vocals again, I wanted Alex to do it again, but he was working with Santana then.
Winning around the time of Winning, right?
Santana kind of just like grabbed him, snatched him right away from us, and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And then he left Woodstock and went to California, and that's history. But then I called a musician from Los Angeles, a guy named Kabir Gandhi, I believe. It was a beautiful voice, and he sang on Again, and on what was that thing? Sweet for the End of an Age or something.
Yeah.
And then after that, that was a tough time for me, because the record company was just all over me to be someone other than I wanted to be, and to do other music than what I wanted to do. It was just such a battle, a tug of war with them. And I was just fed up after we finished Just As I Thought. We turned it in. And then we kind of parted ways. They weren't too interested in giving me budget for another record. But I got a call from Arista UK, which is a completely other division. And they offered me a budget to do a solo album and a solo piano album specifically.
The Bridge?
Yeah, The Bridge.
Oh, I love The Bridge.
That's how it came about. And I took a year off, man. I was really just the whole business of it. I'm sure there's a lot of other musicians you guys have interviewed and can talk to who maybe more so from my generation who can tell you about struggles with record labels and just fighting with them to just do what you want to do the way you want to do it, you know?
Sure.
So I did the bridge after that. It was like, I'm just going to take it down to nothing. You know, I didn't want any band dynamics and all that. So I just played solo piano for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I did. I was able to do live shows. There was a concert promoter who booked me opening for different acts in the Northeast sort of college circuit. And I did
solo piano?
Uh-huh.
Wow, that's great.
Just acoustic piano, yeah. It's kind of brave at the time when I think about it, because they were not always intimate settings. They were like in college, you know, theaters or gyms or something.
Did they move a piano in for you? I mean,
oh yeah, they provided a piano. Absolutely. It was in the contract. Oh, I just had to see it was. In fact, I could request what make of piano I wanted. I could request a Steinway or
Yamaha. What's your favorite? What is your preferred piano?
I'm really fond of Yamaha pianos because of their consistency. You can, if you have a great Steinway piano, or if you have a Steinway piano, it's probably going to sound good. But, you know, every Steinway hasn't been so carefully cared for. I've come across a lot of pianos, even especially back where I came from in Woodstock. And you'd be somewhere and the person would be all proud about their Steinway piano, but you'd go to play it and it would be, you know, the soundboard would be more cracked or, you know, something, because the person hadn't taken proper care of it, you know? And I just find that Yamaha pianos are more, between 5 Yamaha pianos, they're pretty much gonna sound the same, you know, which is...
the Steinway, to me, the worst is newer Steinways. You know, I used to play in this club and they had a new Steinway and I couldn't play the thing. The action was so terrible.
I heard that, yeah.
Yeah, I agree about Yamahas. They're very consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, other piano tuners have told me that, you know, when I used to get my piano tuned, they would talk about how horrible they changed the construction method, you know, and not for the better. So there you go.
Yeah, I have a piano that's called a Sommer, and it's built in 1890 something or other, and special, has a really, you know, deep tone.
Yeah.
Speaking of tone, you know, but it's rich. It's a rich tone, you know, and a heavy action. But we're all particular about our piano, so I just think that's amazing and cool that they moved in pianos for you on that tour at that point, and you could.
Well, yeah, that's not a hard thing for a college or a concert thing to do. That's kind of fairly standard. What was nice about it was that they never cheaped me out. I mean, I always got what I requested, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't show up and have some big surprise in my face. It's hard enough playing.
Is there some video of those tours? Are there any audio?
No, I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. This was before everyone had a cell phone in their face.
Right.
You know, and so no.
Do you remember some of the acts you were on bills with on that tour?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. Not when I was just by myself. I mean, it's so funny. I don't remember who. They would have been like.
I bet someone knows.
college things. But I remember one act that I did open up for, and after a while, I really not that I got tired of playing all by myself solo piano, sort of expanded. So, I started bringing a mini Moog to the concert, and I would set the mini Moog inside on top of the acoustic piano and have so now it's acoustic piano and mini Moog.
Nice.
And then I had and remember a device called an Echoplex?
Oh yeah,
sure.
Yeah, right. So I had mini Moog going through the Echoplex. So I had all these kind of time delay possibilities and stuff, and combining that with acoustic piano. That was interesting. And that gave me some ideas of what to do on the bridge. But after that, I had the option to have another person. So I got in touch with Ernest Carter. And then he did, it was just keyboards and percussion, and largely improvised. I would just like play a theme, start something, and he would just fall in, and we could create a whole thing. You would swear to God it was a rehearsed, worked out piece of music, but it wasn't. But I remember doing those when we started, and we opened for Jack DeJohnette. And I was like, oh, this is deep, you know? And he loved it. He came back, he really liked, and it was just the two of us, acoustic piano, I'm sure I had a Minimo or something, and maybe another synth back then. And he was playing with a quartet with Jimmy Gaff's son. It was brilliant. But you know, Jack is someone I've been listening to since I was like, you know, 7, 8 years old, you know, and turned on his music. So to meet him, and he was so complimentary. And then we met and we ended up playing together for a lot. There's a lot of recordings of Jack DeJohnette and myself.
Really?
And percussion duo. We played around Woodstock quite a lot. Cool. And we did a few things on the Northeast coast. Again, like sort of college sort of venues or a sort of jazz specific thing. And it was very similar. We would just improvise like crazy, the two of us. And, you know, some of that stuff is going to be coming out. You know, I won't say I'm backlogged, but there's a few projects I want to do. But this whole projects I want to do involving like reissuing stuff, you know, earlier music, definitely going to reissue the bridge, remaster it and reissue that. And it's one of these days coming up soon. But there's a lot of recordings of myself with other people, especially Jack, that I'm going to work on and put that out. And there is also video of some of that. There's video of some of those gigs, which will be, you know, coming out. So, did
you ever have him play keyboards and you picked up a guitar or something like that?
Yeah, we did stuff like that. Absolutely. We did stuff like that because he's a good keyboard player. Oh, yeah. And yeah, when we did our shows like that, right. And we both would sing something. Jack is like myself. He has a part Native American in his heritage from the New Orleans kind of side. And part of my family is from Florida. My maternal great-grandmother was Native American. So we would get into things like chants, you know, like sort of native chants and percussion, very kind of abstract stuff. But, yeah,
for some of that.
But that was opening for someone in that time, you know, post band, where that worked out to be like a whole a really good friendship. You know, we were. Yeah, I mean, we'd be friends to this day. We haven't seen each other, you know, since I left Woodstock, of course, and they were on lockdown in Woodstock. But yeah, it was good.
Well, that's new information. I never knew you guys played together. That's really cool. I really look forward to hearing some of that. The Northeast is where I first heard you because I used to live in the Berkshires, and my father ran a radio station, and there was this new band, the East Street Band, that was playing around, and they played the music a lot on this station. And I have a question. I don't know, Sean, do you want to ask about the other stuff first? Because I do have a Springsteen musical question. We can save that if you'd like.
I'm kind of thinking chronologically, so you go ahead and then I'll
Do you mind, David, answering a question about a song on the second Springsteen album?
Okay.
It's about that incredible intro, a New York City Serenade. Just love that. Oh, so beautiful. How'd you come up with it? Did you sit down and play it, or had you been working on it?
It was improvised, you know.
Cool.
That's the thing we used to work out when we were rehearsing the song. When Bruce first showed us the song, right, in rehearsal. And I think, if I'm not remembering it incorrectly, which I easily could be, excuse me, I think he showed us that song when we were in the studio during like a recording session.
Okay.
And as the arrangement was taking shape, and I could be remembering that wrong, but I know we used to do that live, and he used to say, well, you start the song and do like, just play something and improvise in front and do whatever you want to do. And when you feel like you've wrapped up what you want to say, just give me a look, and then it'll start. And then I would stop. Oh, I know what the signal was, that whole arpeggio, descending thing. That was the musical signal that the improv was over.
Okay. That was
just like it is on the record.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then everybody would know it was beyond like an eye signal. It was that musical thing, and then boom, and then the song would go. But that was just Bruce being generous, saying, you know, just do something. You know, he knew I could come up with something nice.
It's iconic. It's an iconic intro. I mean, when we first heard it, it's like you're hearing all these different influences on this song. You know, Gershwin, and I mean a lot of stuff. You know, classical elements and as an intro to that song, I couldn't imagine that song without that intro. To me, it's like part of the
a lot of people say that.
And then I also wondered on you and Danny, was there a way, like how did you separate parts? Do you just play it naturally, or Did you pick your own? I know he was more an organ at that point.
Yeah, that was down to Bruce.
Okay.
What if he wanted you to switch? Sometimes we would start out doing something, and then he'd say, "No, I want you to play piano on this one, and Danny play organ on." But yeah, it was just figured out in rehearsal. So it was easy, but you know, it's Bruce's call.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Those are my E Street questions.
Okay.
So for
Cool.
Jon.
Hey, I know you probably told this story many times, but the whole E Street name, and you could tell our viewers a bit about that.
That's right.
Am I right that it's the street that your mother's house was on? Is that right?
Yeah, that's where we lived, 1105 E Street. So how do you mean? How did he decide to call it that?
Yeah, I mean, he could have chosen his street, but he picked yours. So was it just the sound of it, or was there something about just going down there that everybody kind of remembered? Or
I think it had a sound that did appeal to him. Just a rhythm that, you know, it's just got a thing, a flow. I think what one reason why he might have called it that, when they used to come in my neighborhood, the few times that my mom let us rehearse in the house, either in the basement or in the garage, that my neighborhood was like a truly integrated neighborhood of the time. We're talking about, I was born in 53. So let's say, you know, early 60s, I'm like 10 years old. I'm already playing music. I'm already doing stuff. But here was the makeup of my neighborhood. I was what we call middle class. We weren't lower middle class. We weren't upper middle class. We were like middle class family. Okay. So here's in this one block of E Street, is our family, African American family. Right next to us is a white Jewish family. Mother and father, both school teachers. Across the street from us was a black family. The wife was a nurse and the husband was a landscaper. On the other side of our house, the house in the corner, another black family. Both of the parents were school teachers. And on the other side of the street, across from the other folks, was the rabbi of a white family. He was the rabbi of the town. Across from them was a white family, and they were lawyers. And the synagogue was right around the corner from our house. It was like in the middle of the next block around the corner. And so there was a mixture of African Americans, Caucasians, Italian people. But the thing I think he just could visually see about it and maybe appreciate it was everybody was getting along. There was no big aggravation. Nobody was in anybody's face. Nobody was like, you know, do you really belong here? Or, you know, what do you think you're doing here? It was just no negative energy like that, you know, and to see, because, you know, South Belmar, a few blocks away, was most of the families at that time were African-American. And it would be rare to have a white family in a certain area of town. And then also going the opposite way from our house, going like north, it was exclusively white, and you'd be hard pressed to find a black family. It was just something about that little area. And I think that appealed to him, his sort of sense of society, a community, everybody just getting on with their lives and not being conflicted. I think so. I can't really speak for him. But I remember the night where he sort of got fixated, he kept saying it over and over. Because we're coming back from a gig in Texas, something. And it's the last leg of the thing. So now we're in a car. I think they're dropping me off. I think they dropped me off first. Because back then I didn't have a car, I didn't know how to drive. I didn't get a license until I was like 20 or something. It was crazy. And so he goes, we gotta think of a name. And people were throwing out crazy kind of nonsense names. I remember Vinny Lopez suggested Angel's Underwear. And I said, Vinny, if we're in Angel's Underwear, I can't be in this band. I can't tell my family I'm in a band called Angel's Underwear. It was like joking and everything. So some ideas bandied about and nothing happened. And then there were these sort of markers, these white kind of obelisk looking thing markers on every corner that told you where you were. And we were in between 11th and 12th. So I was on East Street in between 11th and 12th Avenue. So we turned the corner, it's like early in the morning, and I don't know, the way the light just caught it, or I don't know, but he just kept saying, wow, East Street. E Street, wow, E Street Band, E Street Band. And maybe the next day or something, later, the next time we got together for rehearsal, he just said, yeah, this is what we're going to call it.
Great name.
But, you know, I've always considered it an honor just, you know, to be associated with it. The fact that he wanted to call it that the fact that he saw anything positive in it or in me or anything that inspired that, to be really, really happy for the association.
That's beautiful. And you're such an important part of that group, even though you were only in the group in the earlier days. I know you've recorded with him a couple times since then.
Oh, yeah.
But to my ears, when I was listening to it as an up and coming jazz and fusion interested musician that was also into rock, your influence in that group is what brought me right in, you know, specifically that New York City Serenade thing, but also the whole chemistry of the group and the whole vibe.
Yeah, I was definitely bringing in elements that, you know, no one else was quite in that way, you know.
Absolutely.
Which was nice. And, you know, we all enjoyed it. I mean, when that clicked together, I heard some live recordings of the E Street Band back when it was, I got to really specify this, after Bruce decided to change drummers, when Ernest Carter was in the band, right? Remember that?
I'm Born to Run, isn't it?
There's live stuff recorded with him. Not a lot of it. It's all bootleg stuff from like radio shows and other shows. But I heard a tape, so the band was me and Clarence and Ernest, Gary, Danny, and Bruce. It was 3 black guys and 3 white guys. Mm-hmm. That was coincidental, let's say. Right. But the combination and what Ernest brought to that band of his playing, his tightness and his ability to like really rock hard or play subtle or do anything, it was really amazing. There were some things that were so tight, it sounded like a Count Basie big band or something. You know, Bruce was doing all these things where we do hits, you know, he'd put his hand up, you know, and you do a hit. It looks like James Brown thing, you know.
I'm hoping he'll release some of that someday. Because Ernest plays on the track Born to Run, doesn't he?
That's the only studio recording of him with the band.
And was that your last cut, your last song?
Yeah, I think so. Well, that song was recorded. The basic tracks for that was recorded during the sessions for The Wild and the Innocent.
Oh yeah. That.
Okay. Basic tracks and a bunch of overdubs. I mean, like if he tells the story, he says we threw the kitchen sink at that song.
Yeah.
Right. We tried every overdub that could be an overdub. You know,
it's a really interesting drum part on that record for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Ernest.
Such an epic tune, you know. I just love that big descending bit, that big climax.
I love the way back then that why I enjoyed being in the band was it wasn't like being in a band or doing covers, even beyond all that. The fact that he had such a big vision. I mean, it's a long song really for that kind of music back then. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of operatic almost. You know, got all these elements and
sections.
It was fun. It was fun to play that music live.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, that's just an incredible classic. Absolutely.
Those are good stories. Great to hear.
Absolutely. I got a number of people in the chat room that want to say hi, and
hey, people in the chat room.
Got some Tone fans in here that are excited to hear you thinking about resurrecting Tone in one way or another. I think that'd be fantastic. Mm-hmm. I'm curious.
Don't die anytime soon. I can't promise that.
Yeah, get through this thing and get to that.
No doubt. Better days are ahead.
I feel it. Starting to feel it.
Not too far off.
Yeah.
You know, I want to talk a bit about the whole prog fusion thing for a minute, because what I love about the Tone albums is they straddle this line somewhere between Return to Forever and Yes. And I was just wondering, you know, how big of a fan you were of that, all that kind of stuff back in the day.
Huge fans of both of those bands you mentioned. A big Yes fan, huge.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. I do want to talk about
Return to Forever as well. I mean, that's two of my. That was such a. I think a unique and special time in music history, that whole era. Let's say from, if we really go back to say ELP, so Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Sure.
In early Gentle Giant. When that music started to become commercially like successful, you know, there was a period there where like they were not just doing that, but they were selling records, they were filling arenas.
Sure.
You know, stadiums are selling tickets, making money. And here comes bands like Mahavishnu Orchestra. Same thing, man. Very successful commercially. There was a period, it was like a bubble of a thing. Weather Report, playing the biggest venues and everything. So what was magical about it to me was it was this whole, and I don't think you can back up in recorded musical history and find a similar period where all these elements came together and were combined in a seamless way. For instance, the European classical tradition harmonically, the Afro-Cuban rhythmic tradition, right, is in there. The American jazz harmonic take creation is in there, you know, and it's all like, and then, you know, classical music is in there. Classical music, whoever heard like a fugue with a rock beat?
Right.
Nobody ever did that, but when you heard it, to me, that's still one of the most exciting things. To hear classical harmony with a funky beat behind it, that drives me crazy. I mean, so again, that was what's special about it. And then it just became more of a thing that jazz element came in and people were playing jazz and rock. And it was a lot of things where musicians were not so compartmentalized. There are a lot of jazz players who really interested in rock and wanted to check it out and play it and learn how to play it. A lot of rock musicians who weren't so familiar with jazz wanted to get familiar with it and do it. So it was a great coming together of all these musical elements, which is, I mean, to this day, you know, people are still writing like that. I kind of can't help but write like that. But my writing is like, it's not going to show up. Like I'm not going to do 8 albums that sound like true stories. As much as I love true stories and as much as that means to me and what I was trying to do, all my elements, my influence are jazz, classical, R&B, you know, and folk and all kinds of stuff. But it'll come out in its own kind of way. I don't want to get too metaphysical here, but I was sitting here, I'm kind of in one corner of my studio, and I was thinking about, I had watched this thing that Chick Corea, God rest his soul, it was on YouTube, and he was talking about how to learn something, how to practice, how to be more than you want to be. And he suggested it's a classical technique for learning, which is basically you copy the master. Find out what you love, that thing that you wanted, whether it's Jimi Hendrix on solo guitar, whether it's Chick Corea or whatever. He said that's how he did it. He mentioned Bud Powell as an influence and Wynton Kelly. And he said, it was like Chick was given a master class on things, just him in the studio. And he says, this is what you have to do. Identify that thing that you want to do the most that you don't know how to do yet, and find it and just copy it. Break it down and copy it to the point where you can play along with it. And in the process of that, it comes to you. The more times you try and go at it, the more you'll understand it. And then there's going to come a day when you can do that thing that the master did, that you learned how to copy exactly. And then you'll understand it so well that you can vary it. You can start changing it. You'll still be in a neighborhood, but you'll change it and it won't be exactly that. And then it's just one idea leads into another one. It's like its own kind of flower of conceptual understanding. But it starts with copying the master. That's how Indian classical music is taught. You have to sit with, and you just learn it, and they're a bit rough there. You might get your hand smacked if you don't do it right or something. But it's a series of that. You know,
that's awesome.
That reminds me of another of your songs, East India. I forget which album that was on, but that was a cool tune.
That's Forest of Feelings, I think.
That's a good
I love that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Good stuff. You should stay metaphysical. Keep that going.
It was a very good synthesizer sound. Again, the early days of the mini Moog, before they made synthesizers where you could play more than one note at a time, you know, mini Moogs only could play one single note at a time. You could not play chords, right?
Right.
It was another 2-3 years until they developed, and the first one was a Prophet 5. And you could play 5 notes at a time. Like everyone freaked out. Okay, great. But back in those days, it was just a mini Moog. It really taught you what synthesis was about, the building blocks of synthesis. And how can you get a sitar sound out of this box of things? Well, guess what? You can. But you have to start from the ground up. And it was such an adventure of discovery, you know, doing all those the sounds for that. And back then you had to multi-track stuff. If you wanted to play chords with that sound or with a string sound, whatever, you had to go to track 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. You had to back up.
That also made it sound so human, though, and kind of like on the Stevie Wonder records, the little bit that's a little different here and there is what makes it sound so wonderful. So now we can play all the notes at once, but I kind of like that old way a little bit.
Yeah, it's a beautiful sound. It does sound really organic and
was there ever a time live where you had more than one Moog going so you could kind of get a polyphonic thing going anyway?
Well, I used to have more than one Moog going because the one Moog might crap out on you.
Sure.
So we used to have 3 of them. We used to have 3 Moogs, and one was on top of the Fender Rhodes piano, another was on top of the B3, and then at one point when the Poly Moog was invented, there was another one on top of the Poly Moog. So I was kind of a little bit of a semicircle of keyboards, like a U shape. And another thing they used to do before a good friend of mine, Doug Slocum, who used to modify synthesizers, the Mini Moog's oscillators, you had 3 oscillators, they would begin to drift out of tune just because of heat. That's just the way, it was built. So they wouldn't stay tuned. And you'd go to play the thing, it would be, oh God, like out of tune, like, too really terrible out of tune. So he suggested, I told him I was having this problem. He said, well, would you like a blinking LED that tells you how far out of tune it is? So in other words, if it's not blinking, it's just red hanging out solid. If it starts to blink slowly, it means it's slowly going flat or sharp or whatever. And if it's blinking fast, you can dial it back before you touch the thing and sound like, a dead cat or something.
A lot to concentrate on while you're trying to make music.
It was.
Be in the moment.
That's what rehearsal's for.
Yeah.
Let's rehearse before we went out on the road.
Equipment,
Did you do any bills with, some of the other fusion acts back in the day, like, Return to Mahavishnu or any of those?
Yes, we opened for Jan Hammer's group. The booking agent, what's it called? PSA? I don't remember now. CSA or something. Yes, they used to book us on tours in theaters and colleges. We opened for Tony Williams' Lifetime in Chicago.
Nice.
That was fantastic. We opened for Jan Hammer in Connecticut. We opened for Jan a couple of times. Because again, we all had the same booking agency then.
And the same lead synthesizer.
Yeah. Jan was playing Oberheim back then.
Was he?
Yeah. I got this thing. Oberheim made these white modules to where you could just buy this one box. And their idea of polyphony was each module was a voice. So you could have I think it was up to eight little white boxes, and then your Oberheim 8. Now you had polyphony of 8 voices, 3 more than the Prophet 5. And the Oberheims had this fantastic sound. Joe Zawinul used Oberheims a lot. Jan used it. Jan synthesized that amazing electric guitar sound that he used on that Miami Vice theme. And
used it with Jeff Beck quite a bit too, right?
Yeah, outrageous. I just can't believe that. So so all of that was great fun. But it was also, I don't want to be too romantic about old gear because it could be problematic.
Oh yeah.
Like you said, you don't want to have a problem with your gear in the middle of a song. So the modern state of the synthesizers to me is it's heaven. 128 voice polyphony, multiple methods of synthesis in the one machine. I play a Yamaha Montage is my instrument of choice.
Very good.
And it's like a tank. It's incredibly, you could drop the thing and you can just put it back up and it'll.
As long as you don't have to move it, you're cool, right?
Yeah, you gotta have help moving it, that's all.
I've got a lot of friends that are tuning into this show that are big progressive rock fans. And, I don't know if you've heard, but Jon Anderson's Animation is being re-released coming out very soon.
I have heard that from several sources.
It had been on CD, but it was like badly done many years ago. And a lot of people cried foul because it sounded like a 5th generation copy just slapped on there. So it's nice to finally get it done right.
Yeah.
Well, and I was wondering if you could share some memories of how you hooked up with Jon and that tour and putting that album together.
I hooked up with Jon through Clem Clemson.
Okay, yeah, who's the guitar player in the group?
Guitar player. Well, he was in Humble Pie, but he was fantastic in that. But I worked with him and Jack Bruce and Friends. With
Okay,
Billy Cobham.
right.
And we were in London. I was in London doing something, and Clem said, "Hey, I'm Jon Anderson called me to do this session. Would you be interested in doing keyboards? He'd like to, you know." So that's how that happened. And I think I stayed at John's house for like maybe 2 or 3 days while we were working on that. He had a studio. I don't think he lives there anymore, but he lived in this place called, was it, not Earl's Court, Hyde Park, somewhere in this kind of really posh suburb of London. And he, in the back of his property, he had a squash court turned into a recording studio.
Okay.
And it was kind of, yeah.
You think that's
where we did that?
I think he did his solo album back there, Elias and Hello.
Yeah.
Where he just locked himself away with a bunch of keyboards and came out with one of the most beautiful albums. It's kind of almost like one of the early new age albums before anybody even was using that term, but it's very cerebral. Just kind of let it wash over you for an hour. It's a wonderful record. And Animation, though, that was a very cutting edge sounding record. It kind of points to the 80s Yes sound, even though it didn't know it was around the corner.
I think we played some of that on that tour we did. We did one tour with Jon.
Yeah, there's some fantastic boots out there, and I'm just
myself, Jon, Guy. I can't remember the drummer's name. Guy something.
Guy, yeah, he later became like a 80s guitar shredder kind of guy. He kind of reimagined himself as a guitar player and was in all the shreddy guitar magazines in the 80s and stuff.
Wow. I
had no idea he was a drummer until recently, and I was like, wow, that's the same guy. Literally that same guy.
It was, it was fun. I have memories of playing the stuff live and enjoying it. It was fun playing with Clem. We're really good friends. And there was a time back there where we were just around each other a lot because of working with Jack and all this other stuff, and working with Jon. And the tour was fun. We just did one tour of the States.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what I really love is you guys did a couple of giant medleys of old Yes material. That segued in some really cool ways. Sometimes you modulate things up or down. Did you put that together? Because I'm thinking
that was a rehearsal thing. It was Jon's idea, but how to actually do that was just to work it out in rehearsal. What to merge into, how to get in it, and how to get out of it, and all that kind of stuff. Just a rehearsal.
Yeah, well, I love it. Well, medleys sometimes can be a tease, but when you make them 10 minutes long, you get a nice chunk of everything, and it's okay. Right. I like the idea, just as long as you don't tease me in the process. So yeah, that's it. Wonderful tour, and what a great band. I mean, Jon had just left Yes. I don't know if he was. It seemed like he was like harboring any resentment over it at the time.
Well, Jon left Yes about 4 times, didn't he?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. I think only only Wakeman has been in and out more than Jon.
Yeah.
But, that's a wonderful album, though.
Yeah, I'm glad it's being reissued. It's good.
That's really good stuff. So how did you make the Peter Gabriel connection?
That goes all the way back to Forest of Feelings on whatever year was that come out? 1975, I think. 75, 74, somewhere. Yeah. Somewhere. Well, what happened was the record had come out, and I'm at home, and I get a phone call from the record label, and they say, we have a telegram from Peter Gabriel for you. He wants to meet you and wants to talk to you about working on a project. And that's a telegram now. We're going back, right? So I answered back. I said, yeah, I'd be happy to, by telegram. They took it over. What do you want to say to him? I said, yeah, I'd be happy to meet you. So then he flew to New York. He worked out a schedule. He flew to New York. And I was living in Long Branch, New Jersey at the time, living by myself in an apartment. And he took the train down from New York City. And I think he stayed with me for like at least a day or a couple of days. And he had a shopping bag. Peter used to carry a lot of like bags around with him when he's touring. you know, like a sort of Sainsbury bag with all kinds of bits and earphones and stuff, different things. You know, he's got his own system. So, but what he was playing me was the early versions of the songs that ended up being on his first solo album.
Okay, yeah.
And he heard, so Tone was together and we were rehearsing. So I invited him to come to our rehearsal, which he did. He just, you know, sort of sat in the corner and listened to us rehearse because we were getting ready to go out on the road, which is the reason why I didn't end up doing keyboards on his first album. The record company wouldn't, I wasn't able to cancel all that much touring to accommodate his recording schedule. Because he has, I think it was a Canadian producer named Bob Ezrin.
Sure, yeah, did The Wall with Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Kiss, Alice Cooper, all those biggies.
Yeah, and they wanted to record in Canada, but it was just, the calendar just didn't work out. And he understood and everything, but we stayed in touch. We just stayed friends. And after that, you know, he went back to, and it took maybe a week or 10 days before we figured out that I'm not going to be able to physically do that. So, but after that was over, he said, "Oh, no, thanks. It was great meeting you." And then he stayed in touch. Every time he would come to the States, he would play anywhere like in New York City or anywhere on the East Coast, or Northeast anyway, I'd get a phone call and invited to the gig. And it went on like that for a while. And then same kind of thing, I think after the So album came out in I think it came out in early 86 or something. I got a call from his management saying that Peter wanted to change the live touring band. He was going to change the keyboards and drummer. So it was me and Manu Katché. And Manu had already played on the recording.
Yeah.
But I didn't play on the recording, but months before we went out, they said, you know, we really would like to have you do that. And I said, absolutely. And
oh yeah, well, what an amazing album, you know.
That led to a lot of stuff with Peter, who again, he's such a sweet human being.
Oh yeah, and then the follow-up, you were on Us.
Yeah.
Can you share a few memories of making that record?
Of Us?
Yeah.
Okay, I was actually at Real World doing another session for an Italian artist named Zucchero. And I'm trying to remember, it was either Zucchero or this guy named Claudio Baglioni. One of those guys, some Italian superstar. And we were recording in a different studio. Real World Studios has about like 3 or 4 different rooms where you can, you know, record it. And I got a call. The studio manager came and said, "Hey, how long are you here?" And I said, "Oh, well, you know, we're here for like, I think we're there for like 4 days or 4 or 5 days or something." He said, "Well, when you finish your session," he goes, "what time do you guys stop?" I usually stop around dinner time, a little after. I said, "Okay, well, when you finish, can you come up to our studio and have a listen and to play on Us?" There were different, we had about 3 or 4 different tracks, I think. So I did it at night after my day session. And that was it.
Then you went out on tour with them for that one, and
I think I wasn't on tour for Us because I was working with Sting by that time.
Oh, okay. Well,
I was on tour with Sting, yeah.
Okay, well,
They wanted me to go to, and here's a true story. This is gonna sound crazy, but this is how crazy my life is sometimes. So Peter had already called me to do the next thing, the next touring thing. And I said yes. And at that time, it was in between projects with Sting. We'd either just finished something, we're on a long break, or we're getting ready to start something. So at some point, Peter calls me up and goes, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but I'm having technical issues here with the studio and stuff. I need to postpone the start of this project by like 4 to 6 months." And I was like, okay, it's all right. Again, I didn't have anything else, you know, at the time. So I said, okay. So then after that, Sting's management calls me and he goes, "We're going to record the next album," which I think was going to be 10 Sumner's Tales.
Oh, yeah.
We're working on that. And I get a phone call. Let me tell it correctly now. I get a phone call from him saying, "I'm really sorry to do this again, but I need to postpone it a bit later." Again, like another 4 months or something. So, but in the meantime, Miles Copeland had gotten wind that Peter was trying to reach me for something. I don't know. So what happened was, as soon as the phone call's over, he says, look, we're going out on the road as soon as this recording is over, or do you want to be on the road with us? And then I said yes, and then led to all that stuff. But that's how I didn't do the touring, you know, for us. Just another obligation.
Okay. Well, that's an awesome album. And then later you were also on the Up album, is that right?
Am I on Up? I'm not sure about that.
I think so.
I'm not sure. I'm on Last Temptation of Christ. Was that film score?
Passion, yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
I'm on that. I'm on quite a few things on that. That was fun.
Did you work with El Shankar on that one?
Yes.
The same tracks?
Yeah, some of the same tracks El was on.
That must have been fun.
I remember that Peter was like weeks late delivering the final master tapes to Scorsese, and he was really like film people have a kind of it's a different schedule thing than musicians. You know, Peter is known for, and rightly so, and he's used to like taking his time. He'll work on a project, but he won't let it go until he feels satisfied with it, which is a lot of times a lot longer than someone else thinks you should be spending on it. But he's the artist, and he has his methods, he has his ways, he has his reasons, you know. So we were finishing, and we were using the Fairlight. Again, this going back, the Fairlight. So we're sitting in his studio. He has a private work studio above the main studio. It's like in this loft space. So we're sitting and we're staring at this Fairlight screen, and we're sitting like side by side. We're sort of, you know, each other's shoulders, literally kind of touching and staring, and we're trying to figure out what sound we're going to use to do this last overdub. Oh, it was called a cor anglais, which is a human voice kind of sound on the Fairlight also. And it was a melody that he wanted me to play, but we were figuring out the sound together, you know. And this was late now. We'd been up all night working on stuff, you know. I worked on my day session, and I came and worked with his thing at night, and then da-da-da. So he goes, look, Scorsese is sending his assistant at like, I think it was something like early in the morning, like 8:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning, he's going to be here, and you have to give him the tapes. You have to. You can't send them away. You can't put them up for a few days. So he had this hard deadline, and it was the last overdub, and we'd already sort of picked the sound and done the melody, okay? And we're just looking at it, and we listen to a playback, and then we're just looking at the screen, and we suddenly realized that both of us had fallen asleep on each other. We propped each other up kind of on our shoulders. Suddenly we both nodded out like briefly. Yes, it was like a long all-night session. We were tired.
Sure.
And we figured out, and then we realized, and we said, oh, back to the world. And okay. And he goes, I think we're done. That's got to be it. And we wrapped it up, and then, you know, it's knock on the door, and they said, a phone call said, you know, the guy from Scorsese's here for the tapes. And he goes, yeah, okay, send him up, you know.
Made the deadline.
Made it, just barely.
Yeah. But that was a beautiful project. I love what he wrote, what Peter wrote for that album.
Yeah, that's a magical record. You know, nothing's quite like it. You know, it's very unique. Got a question in the chat room. Could you please ask about David's influences on guitar and how guitar playing influenced his synthesizer lines?
That's a good question. First part, guitar influences are chronologically, I might mess it up chronologically. B.B. King. My dad turned me on to B.B. King when I was about like 6 or 7 or something. So B.B. King, Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, Alan Holdsworth, Jeff Beck. Did I say Jeff Beck twice? Sorry.
Yeah, but he keeps growing, so.
Yeah.
Those
those are the early influences. Yeah. But the big three for me were really Hendrix, Clapton, and Beck. And B.B. King is at the foundation of that, because it's the blues that makes me want to do that, you know.
Sure.
It's B.B. King's blues vibrato, and then he does on Lucille. It's like it's an E on the G string in the middle of the guitar, and he just hits it like that. I was like, wow, that's the coolest sound in the world. How do I do
It's like
that?
a hummingbird.
Exactly. It's like a hummingbird.
Juxtaposition of those of the minimalist and meaningful notes with the classical and the other influences and fusion. To me, that's part of what makes you the musician you are. And if I could ask your piano influences on the same note.
On the same note, up to the second half of that question, the guitar playing definitely influenced the synthesizer playing. And one of the first things that I figured out how to do was do guitar riffs, like bending notes, you know, like the classic guitar riffs, how to do that and how to work the pitch wheel and modulation. So yes, it definitely influenced the synth playing. My keyboard influences, the big three were for me, Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, and Herbie Hancock.
Yeah.
There you go.
And there's a lot of other fantastic players that I didn't mention, but those three for me. And there's someone else who later on, I really totally admire and admire the openness that he had to electronic music. A great jazz pianist and a great composer was Joe Zawinul.
Oh yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
An outrageous jazz player. I first heard of him way before any of these instruments were even invented. He used to be in Cannonball Adderley's band.
Sure.
You know, and he was the only white guy in the band.
Played the Rhodes.
You know, yeah, he played acoustic piano and Fender Rhodes. An incredible jazz player, but man, he when that synthesizer came out, he jumped on it. Those records like Mysterious Traveler, and you know, I'm just the hugest Weather Report fan of all time.
Love it. Love every phase of Weather Report, and it's so different.
Every record, every ensemble, when musicians would come in and different bass players and different albums, but every bit of it is just like so stunning.
You were talking about the fusion era, and when I grew up in 72, 3, 4 in the Northeast, there was a place called the Music Inn. You played there with Bruce. But anyhow, one summer, you know, you could see Return to Forever and Weather Report on the same bill, kind of like seeing you with Jan Hammer. But this version of Weather Report had Miroslav was still on bass. Do you know who the drummer was with them? He never recorded on one of their albums. It was in 73 from an iconic 60s band.
I think his name was Eric Cravat.
Yes, Greg Erico. Greg from Sly.
Okay, that's another.
He was on that gig.
Yeah.
Greg
Erico was the drummer on that with Miroslav?
He was on that with Miroslav, and they were just easing into the funk. It was actually the Sweet Nighter tour.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a cool album too. You know, that was some of the earlier funk kind of things. But yeah, I don't know if you'll find a bigger Zawinul fan than anyone that you're talking to right now, but but you're right up there with those cats you mentioned as far as
that's incredibly kind of you to say so. I don't think of myself like that, but
because you're humble.
I aspire to hang out in those neighborhoods of quality.
Well, you brought your own thing to these, you know, to the music, like the breath control synthesizer thing I wanted to ask you about at some point as well. You know, just some of the unique things that you bring to your sound. And that's one of them, the breath control.
Yeah, that's a fabulous device that I to this day, I can't believe that more people don't use it or have it or what. I mean, I seem to be an army of one out there using that thing now. But I know there are other people who used it when it came out. I came across that device at a NAMM show in 1992. Man, let me tell that right. Yeah, it was 90 something. Maybe it might have been 95 actually. And I couldn't believe it. It was a major upgrade in the quality of the sound for, horn sounds and any kind of wind instrument sounds, the dynamic ability of it. And you can set the thing. I have it set so that it's the most difficult to play. If you have the device in your mouth and don't blow into it and press down a key, you will hear nothing. Absolute zero. You have to begin to like start, and it's a setting on the headpiece that does it for you. You don't have to set it that way, but I set it like that because that makes it the most realistically feeling like a wind instrument. Because I had the experience of playing clarinet in school. I played clarinet from like 3rd grade until sophomore in high school, which I didn't really enjoy. I didn't really want to play the clarinet, but I had some experience with a wind instrument and what it feels like and take the sound of. So that's been useful, but it's one of my favorite things to do live. And it's the #1 question live.
That's part of your sound. That's part of your unique sound.
You know, people don't even know what it is. It's like, you know, what is that thing in your mouth that you're doing?
I think we heard you do that with Sting here in Atlanta at the Fox Theater. Wasn't Vinny on that gig?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Yeah,
I did it a lot with Sting.
Yeah.
I did it with Eric Clapton. They had perfected it more. They made it, the one I use is it's called the VL1. It's a 4-rack space black box. There's a smaller version of it that sounds pretty good that I use live, but for studio and for a big tour live, I use this Sting. And it was that album Reptile. That was like 20 some years ago now.
Yeah, it's a great record. I like the middle on there. I forget the name of it. Maybe the title track.
Instrumental, like a bossa nova kind of. Is that
that's it. So we get the rehearsal, and if you can find it on YouTube, I just saw it accidentally. God, I've just got over like about 4 weeks of therapy. I had an operation on my hand, and it was all healed up, all went well. And my therapist was showing me this thing on YouTube. She found it's from the Budokan Theater in Tokyo, whatever year 9/11 was, 2001, whenever that was. And it's us playing that song, Reptile, the title track. It's an instrumental. It's really kind of Latin-y, it's kind of jazzy vibe.
Yeah.
And he said, what do you want to take a solo in it? And I got a soprano sax sound. My best sort of Wayne Shorter imitation. And I said, how about this? You dig this? And he was like, what is that? And I explained all to him. He goes, it sounds great. And then you can see the film of us playing that song. And it's so beautifully shot. There's there must be about 6 cameras on stage, because you can see him, you can see his face from my angle, my face from his angle, dead on from the audience. It's beautiful. So we're playing that song, and I'm really just giving it something. I'm having a great time with it. And, the audience digs it. And at the end, he'd always say, use that blowing thing. It's called that blowing thing, use that. And he said, okay, where else? And then we played Badge. And he said, why don't you do a solo in Badge? He didn't want to have the only solo in the song. He'd like to give up somebody else's solo too. He said, yeah, use that blowing thing again. And it was good. And I used it on Wonderful Tonight.
That's what I was going to ask you about, the changes on that.
I'll tell you,
the changes that you played on that.
One of my fondest memories of working with Eric, again, who's just a lovely human being. And to get to work with someone and get to know and travel with someone, even for that whole solid year, was so special. But one night we're playing, I don't know if it's the same night as this Budokan thing, but it's one night we're in Europe and we're playing Wonderful Tonight, and the solo came up and I got a tenor sound, a tenor saxophone sound in the thing. And I went for it. And I just really, when I'm playing music, it's like I disappear. David is not needed in anybody's song. I disappear and I become the song. I become the character in the song. I become the guy that he's singing about, I just become the song and all the feeling. And I just went to town on tenor sax on this solo, and I just gave it everything I had, and lost passion and everything. And the song ends, and the audience, I think they started clapping before the solo was over or something. So the song ends, and the audience is clapping. He walks over to me while the audience is still clapping. He puts his hand out. He goes, "Great solo, man."
That is so neat. And he was on your short list of influence.
Like all of sweat and everything. I'm like trying to get over what just happened.
Yeah, it touched him. That's all. It touched him. And I don't know. Do you recall the changes? The way that you played the changes on Wonderful Tonight? Do you remember? It's on a live album. You go up to the 3 instead of the descending bass line, and it was so sweet. And we used to play that in this band. I'd say, play the Sancious changes on this, and we'd be on a wedding or something, and we kept really. And because it was hipper, it's nice to go up to the 3 there, just gives it a little breath, and just opens it up a little.
It's just one of those things, man. Some really hip ideas came out, just working things out on the rehearsal. That on that album, that version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow?
Yeah, the last song, isn't it?
Well, that's heartbreakingly beautiful. The only reason that happened was we rehearsed this Shepperton Studios in outside of London for that tour. It's like a big film place with big rehearsal spaces. So we're there, and we had finished that day's rehearsal, and everybody else was actually already off the stage or walking up the stage or putting their coat on. And Eric was sitting in a stool still, and he was playing the beginning changes of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. He was trying to remember it, but he was having a hard time remembering like the third or fourth chord or something. And Nathan East heard it. He goes, "Wow, what are you doing?" He goes, I was messing around with it on vacation," he said. He's on vacation before the tour started. He goes, "Yeah, I was just trying to see if I could figure it out." So Nathan comes over, picks his bass up, and they start playing the song. They get to the part where Eric is not sure about. And Nathan goes, "Oh, it's a something. It's an F sharp. Oh, okay." And then I sit down, and then everybody came back eventually on the thing, and we started playing it. And we worked it out. I mean, that whole thing got worked out in about maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes. All the changes and all the stuff. Steve Gadd came back on. And that was magic, but that was at the end of a day.
Nice.
And I mean, Eric, he's one of my favorite singers. I mean, yeah, he's a fantastic, legendary guitar.
I love his voice.
But I love the way he sings. He never oversings. And he's got that lived-in, super sincere voice, you know, that's just wonderful. Yeah.
I don't think he gets enough credit as a vocalist, but I've always kind of loved his vocals as much as his guitar playing.
He's awesome.
Yeah. That was an amazing band. That whole band on that live album with Billy Preston.
Yeah, Billy Preston, right?
I mean,
for me to get to work with Billy Preston.
Right, I was going to ask about that. What was that like?
That was magic, and he was a lovely, lovely guy, man. We got on great. We had the monitoring on stage for that tour was so high class, so excellent. All those tours, like if you're touring with Peter Gabriel, Clapton, Sting, anybody on that level, the monitoring on stage is worked out. That's rehearsed as well, so that when you're in the show, it sounds like you're like a live recording. It's that balanced. It sounds like a record that somebody has mixed.
Very inspiring.
During your part live, right? So I could hear he was on the opposite side of the stage as me, playing organ, and he had a keyboard set up, and I had a synthesizer, and I had another kind of like organ setup. But we could hear each other so well and see each other, eye contact. And we had this appreciation. I would do something on the piano, and we'd look up, and I could see him like getting off on it, you know? Like, "Oh man, that was cool, David." And it's like a lot by eye contact. And same thing. He was an amazing organist and amazing pianist, you know, songwriter, singer, everything, man. And he could wear that organ out. He could make it sound like birds, for God's sake. I mean, and just the greatest, most soulful, dynamic organ playing of all time.
His hit single, "Out of Space."
Yeah.
Well, the synthesizer and the clavinet.
Yeah. And you know that he wrote the Wonderful Tonight, that Joe Cocker song.
"You Are So Beautiful." Yeah, with
You Are So Beautiful. Yeah,
yep, I do know that.
Yeah.
Yep. Very cool.
Such a wonderful.
Also off stage as well was that, you know, that whole time, man, we had such a nice vibe in the band. You know, it was so pleasant. You know, we enjoyed each other's company, and you know, Billy and I just
long tour.
Chance we had to talk. You know?
We're on the road a long time with that group.
That tour started in January and it ended in December.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really had time to really.
Before Christmas, yeah. So I had a birthday on that tour, which was great. We were somewhere.
I think that's so neat. You know, he was on your short list of guitar influences.
Yeah.
Lined up at his band. That's just
same with Jeff Beck.
Yeah, I mean, okay. And I got to play with Jack Bruce.
Yeah.
Because my favorite trios back then were Cream and Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Sure.
You know,
the Jack Bruce album. What was it called? I've always wanted to do something like this.
I've always wanted to
do this. Okay. Wasn't Billy Cobham on drums on that?
Yep, that's him.
That's a cool album.
Yeah. Jack did so much cool stuff.
Jon, there's another chat room question.
Okay, which one? What do you say?
We have time. It's actually from Jerry Grillo, and he'd like to know about if you have any recollections or memories of the School Days album with Stanley Clarke.
Yeah, I do. Yep. I remember, first of all, the School Days album. When I got the phone call to do that record, I was at home on E Street. I was in my mom's basement, and I had a little setup down there. I think Ernest had left some drum kit there, and I had a keyboard, something. So anyway, I'm down there messing around with my little school friends and stuff. And my mom comes and I said, "David, there's a phone call for you." He says, "Who is it?" Stanley Clarke. I go, wow. And everyone that I was with goes, Stanley Clarke calling me on the phone. I go, yeah, okay, I'll be right back. And he called, and it was an offer to play. And he said, I heard your record. I really, really liked it. I'd like you to play on a couple tracks of my album. And actually, the first time I worked with, before School Days, it was a call was for Journey to Love.
Oh, that's right.
That's a
I only played guitar, and I was the other guitar player on that record because Jeff Beck did all the other guitars.
Wow. That's
Wow.
right.
And I played, I think it's Concerto for Jazz Rock Orchestra.
I love that record. You know, that kind of, it's like very close to Return to Forever style on that record. You know,
very much. But what I remember about it was after he called me, he said, I want you to come to my house and, just go over some music. So, okay, he had it written out. He wanted to give me the chart and everything. So went to his house. He was living somewhere outside of Manhattan. And that was the thing. I remember being like a bit nervous because, again, these guys are my idols. I mean, Stanley Clarke, these people, I'm buying everything I can find you on, and I'm like studying your stuff, like trying to figure it out. Oh, so I'm at his house and I pull out my guitar and he pops some music in front of me. And I'm like, phew, okay. And he didn't have I don't think he had an audio version. We weren't that hip with audio back then where he had like a worked out MP3 with all the parts. It was like, no, we got to read this, check it out on paper. He goes, this is how fast it is. It was all riffs like that, and okay, I'm trying to figure it out, read it. And it worked out fine. He said, no, don't be nervous. I mean, no, I'm not the fastest sight reader. I can sight read, but I'm not the fastest sort of sight reader. And maybe especially on guitar, like sight reading stuff on guitar is like, okay. But I got it. He said, yeah, you're doing fine. Just relax. And I did it. We went through the whole tune. He gave me the chart to take home and mess with later. And then he called me. I think the session was done in New York City at, was it at Electric Ladyland or somewhere?
Sounds right.
Anywhere, somewhere in the city. And that went fine. And, but I think I'm just on that one tune on that one.
It's an epic tune though. It's an epic piece.
And then after that, he called me again and said he was going to do another record, School Days. He said, yeah, I want you to play keyboards and guitar on it. And that was fun. And we did one tour of the States with that School Days band with Ray Gomez guitar. Yeah, that was fun. Again, it's fun to play with people who inspire you so much.
So who else was in that lineup? Do you recall? Because you were on guitar and keys.
Ray Gomez was playing guitar. He played on the album as well. Stanley was on bass, and I think it's Jerry Brown on drums.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Jerry's fantastic.
From the later Return to Forever also.
Yeah.
What guitar were you favoring back in those days? Strat, Les Paul? Or
you know what, man? I never favored a Les Paul. That's a heavy guitar.
Yeah, it's like carrying a coffee table around your neck.
Yeah, it's a lot to deal with physically. I know Bruce used to love his Les Paul back in the day before
early days.
Before he switched to Telecaster. I always preferred. I started playing in SG first. I had this job after I quit high school a couple years early. So I was 15. I quit high school when I was in my junior year. And I had to get a job. So I got a job landscaping for a while, which was kind of backbreaking work. And landscapers, gardeners know, you bust your butt all week, you make enough money to blow it on the weekends.
Sure.
And then you get back and do it all over again. So I did that for a while. And then I got a job in a guitar factory, the Dan Electro Guitar Factory in Neptune, New Jersey. Yeah. I didn't last there that long, maybe a year or something, maybe a little bit less. But what they used to do was they would give you sort of damaged parts. And it was like an assembly line. So there would be the neck sanding line. There's just this belt with necks coming down, and you had to like pick up this certain quality sandpaper, sand this thing, put it back on the thing and send it on. It was like that, Or if they put you on the body part, you had to do some function like that. So every now and then a kind of irregular would come through that wasn't really nothing wrong with it. It just was physically kind of funky. You could take that home if you wanted, because it wasn't good enough to be in the stock. So we used to take parts home, and through working there, I learned how to put together and take apart guitars. So I took all these parts, I put together an SG shape, and then I cut the horns off. I didn't like the pointiness of it. So I like made it like snub nose. It was like a snub nose SG. It was weird.
Okay.
And then I took it had a red lacquer on it, which I don't like. I took the lacquer off. They showed us how to do that. And it was this beautiful wood underneath, this beautiful wood grain thing. Then I put it back together and I used that for a while. And then I got into Strats. Yeah, Hendrix was like, there's a reason he's playing that guitar. When I realized the tonal possibilities on the Stratocaster are above and beyond just two humbuckers.
Sure, yeah.
Because of the out of phase switches and everything. And it's just
a beautiful sound.
And it's so physical. The thing tucks into your body, you know, the way it's like made. And it's really very comfortable to deal with playing, and you have all these great sound possibilities. So that's my guitar of choice is Stratocaster.
Love it, love it. And what were you using for amplification?
Either Fender amps or, gosh, I used to switch around a bit. I was never crazy about Marshall heads. I thought they were a little too bright, too kind of like, you know, just more body. For a while, I actually used a bass guitar head and a cabinet with like maybe four 12s in it, but it was an actually bass amp head for a while. That's some weird experiment of mine. I don't know how long I lasted with that, but now I just like anything. I've just got a reissue of a Fender that's I think it's a 72 vintage, and it's only like, it's like, I don't know, 40 watts. It's less than 50 watts, but it's gorgeous. And it just sounds, I run the thing at 2. If I'm, you know, I have a little guitar studio part of the living room, and that thing on 2, man, fills the space up crazy. You know, whenever I get to play out live again, that's what I'm going to be, you know, using, you know, even if I do a big tour again, because it's gorgeous. It's just that the classic warm Fender.
Do you use any pedals or outboard?
I do. In fact, I just got this thing. I was going through a Sweetwater catalog. That's an instrument catalog for you non-musos. And I was looking for a new pedal board because a lot of my stuff is still in storage in New York, and it's kind of on a container now. It's going to be on a container soon, get here. So some stuff I couldn't wait for. So I saw this thing. It's a pedal board called Head Rush. And it is amazing. I have my highest, and I researched it. I mean, there's like about a dozen different types, but it's a new design. I think it's by this company called 11, but it's called Head Rush. And it's about, it's a pedal board. It's got one pedal, which could be a volume pedal or a wah-wah pedal or a sine to any kind of function. And you basically create your own stomp boxes. You can recreate that pedal board. You've got 8 options in one setup, like 8 individual options. So on position 1, you can have, you know, different kind of distortions, time delays, and wah pedals. It's crazy because once you understand the concept, you can go nuts. I just used it on this song. I'm doing a song for someone where it's kind of a country kind of feeling. And this combination of effects that I put in, and then using the volume pedal very carefully, it sounds like a pedal steel guitar.
Wow.
I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's fantastic. But yeah, I'm all about that now, and I'm using that in the studio. And what else? Like I said, I'll be using it live when I can play live again.
Are you doing many sessions for people? Are people sending you tracks, and
you know what?
Time for that?
I'm glad you asked, because I am doing some things. What I'm working on right now, this moment, is I got asked by this company called Cleopatra Records in Las Vegas. They do tribute albums to different artists. And I've worked with them for about maybe, like, I don't know, over the last 6 or 7 years. I've done a few projects for them. So they called recently and said they're doing a tribute album to Eric Clapton. And the song they want me to do is I Shot the Sheriff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I came up with a kind of, I'm going to say this arrangement more resembles maybe what Quincy Jones might do with it as an arrangement.
I like the sound of that.
Or you would preach like maybe Oliver Nelson.
Okay, not necessarily reggae then.
Yeah, no, it's not. No, it's different.
been done already.
So I'm working on that. I have to turn it in before the 15th of March, which I'll do. But I have come, I had this thing I tried a couple years ago, last year, where I offered my services as an audio service to do what I do for this record company for just individual songwriters, people who aren't hardcore professional songwriters. If you send me your file, your song, whatever form, I'll rearrange it. I'll add stuff to it. You can specify, like, I just want you to play piano on it. I'll do that and send it back to you. And I've had some success with it, but I wish, on the one hand, it was a little bit funny because there's a certain level of not professional, which is sort of not really good. It gets a bit squirrely. But there's a certain level of not being a hardcore professional like myself, but there's still some really good songwriters out there. And I've worked very successfully with, there's a couple from Connecticut, Dan and Cassie Russell. They're beautiful. She sings and he writes and plays guitars. I've done like 6 or 7 songs for them. They're really good.
You produce them and help arrange? Is it that?
Yeah, but they basically give me their song and they just cut me loose with it. Just do what you think sounds good on this. But I'd love to have more clients like that, but I almost want it to be by referral from other musicians.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if people want that, if anyone in the chat room is interested in that, then they should go to my website and leave a message there, leave a contact that you're interested, and then my publicist will get back to me. We can set something up. But especially now that I'm not playing live, the more that I do, the better. It's really enjoyable work, and it's kind of as fulfilling as you can get without being in a room with other musicians and playing a set list or something and having audience feedback. It's very fulfilling to come up with a nice arrangement of somebody's song and give it back to them and have them be really.
And for them, they get the treat of having their music enhanced by you and, you know, your expertise. So it's good all around.
A win-win. Yeah.
Are you using Pro Tools or Logic?
I use Logic.
Yeah.
A question in the chat room. Did you ever play guitar synth? And what do you think of them?
You know, briefly. I briefly played guitar synth. One of the early ones that came out, I think it was called the Synthax.
Yeah.
I sort of toyed around with that a little bit. I think they're interesting. Probably the state of what they are now today is better than that. I wasn't so blown over by it, frankly. I was more interested in just more guitar tones from the guitar rather than using the guitar to trigger a synthesizer.
You have the synth part covered. So
right.
you guitar, you want to play guitar.
You play keys, you don't need that.
It's very useful. And I mean, guitar synths are very useful. I saw there was a behind the scenes thing on The Mandalorian, and it was a clip about the soundtrack, the composer, what's his name? He's brilliant. Ludwig Göransson. I can't, my mind is good today. But it was a whole thing about him. And they were talking about, you know, how did you come up with your sounds on this show? They broke it down like certain scene, like what's going on here in this background scene? He picks up, well, I did a bunch of things. He goes, I took some different flutes and all this kind of stuff. And then, but I also went back into my this is a vintage Roland guitar synth.
Oh yeah.
That is just loaded up with like some very exotic sounds. And he just plugged the thing in. He goes, look, it just hit a chord, and then the chord comes and there's all this other magic behind it as well. So it's one of those great devices where it's just ready to roll. You just have to use your taste on what you're going to use from it, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, guitar synths have been cool. My focus at the moment now is more from just guitar sounds, really good processed guitar sounds, using more traditional stuff like time delays and, you know, and reverbs and
sure. Well, with that head rush, the sky's the limit, you know.
Hey man, check it out too. On this device, there's a one of the boxes you can put in your rig. It's a reverse. They call it time warp. It's that Hendrix backwards guitar. Awesome. Like they do in the studio, where you take the reel off and then play to the song backwards.
Yeah. And
then play it forwards, and it sounds like that. Well, there's a button on here that does that. You just can play forwards, and it'll spit it back out to you backwards. It's gorgeous.
Oh, I love that.
So hip.
That's great. Question in the chat room: was Sting demanding when rehearsing, or did he let you loose?
Sting is a sweetheart, and we're rehearsing. We have a lot of fun, and yes, he's demanding, but in a focused way. It's not in a, I don't know if demanding is the right word for it. He knows what he wants to hear. He's no shortage of an idea, but at the same time, if me or Dominic or Vinny or somebody comes up or with something that he didn't think of, he's all for it. If it's great, if I do a chord inversion of something he showed me, and that's not what he showed me, but it sounds hip, he's like, oh yeah, do that, same thing, any good idea that comes along, he's all for it. But he's
ever heard his big quote, it's never a chord until I play a bass note?
Yeah. Technically not true, but technically.
But, I get where he's coming from. How did Gabriel compare to Sting as a band leader?
They're different. They're different people. What they have in common, I think, is their whole appreciation for the musicians. I mean, you're working with people who they have the utmost respect for you. They know what you can bring to it, and especially both of those guys. That's why when you keep getting called back, for a second, third, or fourth time, then that working environment is so nice, because it's like you're automatically trusted. You don't have to prove yourself, over and over again, whatever. And meaning that, okay, they obviously trust you, but you still may be something that you have to work out or work on or change or learn that you don't have together. Sure. Again, that's what rehearsal's for,
Absolutely.
It all gets worked out in rehearsal, but the atmosphere is great. Peter's a way of rehearsing. He's a bit, again, he takes his time and he's focused again too, but we go kind of long days rehearsing with Peter, because it's after we get to the music rehearsal part, there's also the stage production part, and you have to work it out with production rehearsals, it's called. The lights, the choreography, the lights, where am I on stage during what song, all that kind of stuff. But I say that's the similarity, and they're both good friends. They know each other well, and
they even did that tour together a few years back.
That was an incredible tour. We were going to do that tour in England as well, and what happened was Peter's wife, Maeve, took ill, and he was not prepared to go anywhere while she was in the state of health she was in. I know she's totally recovered now, I hear, which is fine. But we did that Sting, Peter, Gabriel tour in the States. We had a great time.
Yeah, it was kind of neat to see them dabble with each other's music and mix it up like that. I thought that was just a really, just a wonderful pairing.
Plus also, and then we did it again, something similar like that with Paul Simon.
Oh, I love Paul Simon so much.
Once it gets up, especially I think the Sting, Peter Gabriel thing and Paul Simon thing, it's the camaraderie between all the players,
Sure.
I didn't know the guys I knew one of the guys. I knew the saxophone player in Paul Simon's band, because we had done a session together in Los Angeles years ago. But I didn't know the rest of them personally, just sort of by reputation. But then, you're in the same room rehearsing, you're flying on airplanes together, you're having dinner together. So it's the camaraderie of all the players, together, and combined with the music you got to play. And, to play in front of an arena full of rabid fans.
Oh,
people are very excited to see you there and hear the music. Is just great.
What a treat. Can you share a few memories of making 10 Summoner's Tales? That's like maybe my favorite Sting album outside of the very first one he did.
That's a great record, man. I think every record on that, every song on that record was like a top 10 hit or something.
Yeah, and it's such an upbeat record. Some of his previous ones were a little introspective, and that one really kind of has a fun air to it.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great record. I remember it fondly because we all stayed at his house that was recorded at Lake House. He has a house that's about a half a mile from Stonehenge. It's in the English countryside. It's a 50-some acre estate. It's gorgeous. And what we did for that time, because they were still, I think, doing some work on it, they were living in it as a house. But they took the main, it's actually a castle that they converted into a house. So they took what was the main dining room and made it into a recording studio. Took out all the furniture, took everything off the walls, and then they wheeled in SSL consoles and everything else, drum kits, monitors. So that's where we recorded it, in his house. And we all stayed there. We all had our own rooms upstairs, and you can get up and do what you want to do in the morning, have breakfast. It was great. I mean, they cooked breakfast for you. You could sort yourself out for breakfast. I used to get up in the morning early. I'm an early riser anyway, and just go for a walk in his gardens. One of his dogs, Willie, who's passed away now, bless him, his Beagle, fantastic dog. He would hang out with me and walk, and then come back and have a bite. And we always had a time. He said, well, let's meet a little bit before the session starts and talk about it. Then we'd show up and record. We would record till lunchtime, take a break, go back and record until dinner time. And then after dinner, we'd usually like just listen. We'd go back in and just listen to everything and then call it a night. And there was another, he had this big pool table, a snooker table actually, in a kind of guest room a little ways down the hall from the studio. So then we'd go in there and hang out, watch TV. We'd have some drinks, play pool, and then everybody, oh, I'm tired, see you tomorrow. It was weeks of that, really. It was just really a great atmosphere.
Yeah, well, I think it comes through on the record as well. I think kind of sometimes the situations that records are made in kind of seeps into the grooves at times.
Oh, always. I think it always does.
Yeah, and so if there's a lot of joy going around, it's gonna come through in the record. And if there's a lot of tension, then it can cast a pall over everything without really even trying. Okay, well, we'll wrap it here up in a couple minutes here. I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to chat with us today, David.
Listen, it's my pleasure. I so appreciate the attention to this music. It means a lot to me, man. Thank you so much.
You've given a lot to us and to a lot of people.
So much joy for so many years. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was your favorite tour? That's a question in the chat room right now. Gosh, very tough to pick one.
Favorite tour? It's going to be tough. God. Can I pick three, please?
Yeah, do.
Eric Clapton, the Eric Clapton tour, 2001. The Soul Tour, the original Soul Tour in '86.
Sure.
And the tour for 10 Sumner's Tales.
Oh yeah.
The first one. Those three were just like magic. Yeah.
How much did you guys add to those songs? Like, would Sting come in with like a rough version on guitar, like a tune like 7 Days? How did that develop?
Excellent question. And he just cut us loose. Back then he had a Synclavier. Remember after the Fairlight, and then another Synclavier came along, was really much more sophisticated. So he had this thing and learned how to use it enough to make these very spare demos. 7 Days, great example. The demo that he played for us, and the way we set the studio up in, basically set up around him. He was in the middle of the room on a stool, bass, and we were kind of in a semicircle around him. I was here, Vinny was over there, and Dom was kind of off to his side. So we're sitting there, and he's playing it. He goes, Hugh Padgham, go, Hugh, play the demo. And the tunes comes out, and you couldn't have imagined anything more spare. It was just the basic idea of the tune. He didn't even have like a hip drum groove or loop or nothing. Maybe this pre-loopy days, but no, I doubt it. But it was that empty. It was just it was the changes, right? The boom boom and what the chords were. And he had a little rough vocal. So then, okay, well, what are we going to start with? What's it in? It's an F, I believe. So then Vinny came up with the groove. Thing starts playing the bass line. Vinny came up with that groove. He didn't hear it. He didn't say, hey, do this, do that. He just, well, what about this? I came up with the idea to have it be the pizzicato strings, that whole pluck thing. That was me. I said, how about this? And then Dominic was Dominic on the guitar. He does all this sonic magic inside and out. But yeah, sonically, we put that together. Yeah.
That's a wonderful tune. And
based on it, and he's always directing, that's right. And or try like tweaking it a little bit, but the basic thing about it. So that was a lot of fun to work on that record because all of those songs were demoed like that. These really easy, simple demos, and there was room to try out different sounds and different things.
Well, I love the lyrics on that too. There's been a lot of songs written about the days of the week, but I think that's the most eloquent one of them.
It's such a charming song lyrically. It's way clever. But then that's his mind and his heart, his literary expertise. It's totally some hip lyrics.
Yeah, he's in a league of his own when it comes to
Yeah.
that. But, you know, most rock lyrics are just not on that par. So it's, yeah, it's always wonderful with him. Question in the chat room: any Spinal Tap moments come to mind? Anything you can think of where everything was just too ridiculous or everything went wrong?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, this is a good one because it's how it was referred to. As this is totally Tap. The Eric Clapton tour, I think we're playing in Osaka. And for some reason, traffic was really bad. So we didn't get to the building in as much time before showtime as we would normally have because we were held up in traffic. But we get there. Show starts. They take us through this whole kind of back way. We're like going. It looks like we've left the venue area and now we're in some kind of dirt roady thing. And we're going for a while. So we're looking at each other and goes, what's going on? This is like weird. And I don't remember if I was in the car with Eric or with Steve. We usually had like 2 cars, 3 cars. Anyway, we're like, this is funny. So finally we get there. And they took us in this back way of the building. So we had enough time to go upstairs quickly, get dressed, put your clothes on, and then get back to the area where now the stage manager, somebody's going to lead us onto the stage to do the show. The place is full, it's sold out, and like thousands of people are all screaming and everything. And so he's leading us to this way that is going to keep us from seeing the audience, supposedly. Okay, so we go down this elevator, and now we're into this like sub-basement area. We're like below the building, below the stage area. And it's dark, it's not well lit. And we're like looking at walking around and it just keeps going forever. It's like, I thought we could just walk under the stage. He's taking us this way. And at some point it goes, now we're going through these dark, there's curtains and it looks like a backstage behind a theater gig. And it looks like anything but the way to get on stage. And somebody goes like Steve Gadd or Andy Farrell, somebody said like, this is so Tap, I can't believe it. We fell out. We just started laughing. There's nothing we could do about it. It's like, can't get on the stage till you get us there. So, and finally we arrived at some roundabout thing and pulled back a curtain and there's a stage. But yeah, that's exactly what we said. Like, this is so Spinal Tap.
Did you pass the maintenance man down there working on the pipes and all?
it was that kind of vibe. That's where it was. It was that neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. Just got a couple more quick ones and we'll wrap it up. My friend Fernando says, hi, David. Loved your playing on Andy Pratt's Motives.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Well, that's going back a ways. Wow. Very much. Thank you very much. That was fun.
Yeah. Okay. Jez, you got any more questions before we wrap it up?
Pretty much got them all in. I got them all in, and I sure appreciate, David, you answering all those deep questions because you answered a lot of things that I wondered about, like about.
You know what I wondered about? On Forest of Feelings, you took Dixie and turned it on its ear. I've never heard it done like that. What was the inspiration and how'd you put that together?
The inspiration for that was Charles Ives, a great composer. And if you guys are familiar with him, but Charles Ives was a genius composer who luckily was wealthy enough. His main job was working at a bank, but he was a brilliant composer and he composed a lot of stuff. He used harmony as a form of sarcasm to make a political point. You know, he's very good at this. He has this one piece that is written in such a way that it's like 2 marching bands marching towards each other. And they actually merge into each other and out of each other sonically. The guy's a genius. Anyway, he has a lot of like deep music like that is sort of harmonically can be cynical. And I lived in both sides of my family. My family are from Florida, from the South. And as a kid, I spent time in the South. And I won't say too much bad stuff about the South. I don't want to offend any.
I live in Atlanta, so you know. I'm
Yeah, are you guys coming from Atlanta, both of you?
Yeah, we're both in
live
Atlanta.
here, man.
Yeah.
Okay. I lived in Richmond, Virginia, in what was the early 70s, late 60s, whenever it was. And it was me and Ernest, and I was already writing some of the stuff that was going to end up being on Forest of Feelings. And I just wanted to make a statement about the ridiculousness of that song, lyrically, the spirit of it. I know, oh, I wish I was in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away. That's really fucked up. It's not good. No, I don't wish I was in the land. And old times there should not be forgotten. And it's shameful, the whole thing. So that was just me melodically. So I just took the same rhythm of the melody, and instead of making it all major and happy, I made it as dark as I possibly could. And all I did was use only the black keys. I think there's one F natural. Yeah, the rest of it is all on black keys. It's some sort of bass line, and it's kind of a chromatic bass line. So yeah, but that was just me. I just wanted to, yeah, think about it this way, folks, you know, see if you recognize your Dixie in this dark harmonic expression.
And there's a cut on the new album that ends with something that reminded me of your Dixie record. I think it's in the middle of the night, the very end.
At the very end, perceptive. Again, man, that's just me being cynical.
And I see that as, it reminded me of what you did with Dixie.
It's the chord on the SO, say, can you see? Yeah. Rather than just a pure melody. I put a 12-tone chord on that. Yeah. Darkly like, it's not like a happy.
It's a great way to end that song. And that had a little Ives in it as well, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other memories of that album? The opening cut, Cassandra. I was wondering.
Sweet Cassandra?
Yeah, could you tell us a bit about how that came together?
Oh gosh, that was just a bit of writing, man. That was just a very heavily classically influenced piece. It just came through. You know, all this music comes through me. It arrives, and it sort of plays me, and there's an appearance like I'm doing something, but I swear to you, the way that it feels, it's just energy that comes in, and then it comes in. And okay, you may have to. Even if you think, well, I'm going to tweak this. No, that's it tweaking you to tweak that. It just has this appearance of that my identity is actually doing something, but it really isn't. So again, that the song just came out of me. It's called Sweet Cassandra because I had a little crush on Clarence Clemens's cousin, Cassandra. We had a brief, flirtation. And I needed a name for the song, so that's who it's named after.
Very cool.
Some of those theories are very metaphysical, as you explained before, and I was wondering, have you used meditation or anything like that to get into this space that you're talking about, which is music comes through you in that way, or is this just something that naturally happens with you?
It just naturally happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been involved in meditation since I was a teenager. I was very involved in the transcendental meditation movement. Back in the day when Maharishi and all that was in the culture. But no, what I'm talking about, that happening, that just happens to anyone. That's the happening. That's just what happens.
Well, the reason I ask is I get to that place through meditation. I also was involved in TM for a long time, and I'm a musician.
Right. Yeah.
And always feel that you get to that space where you just let it come through you and you don't think. And, I just wondered how you arrived at that. Because you speak metaphysically in some ways, which I really, really did.
Yeah, I will just say that formal meditation like that is not a prerequisite to that happening.
I agree.
It can, of course, happen, and be deepened in all that. But I would just say a formal form of meditation like TM or anything like that is not necessary for that occurance to.
Yeah, just have to be ready for it to come through you and just be open.
Yeah, because it's everywhere. It's in the air. It's crazy. It's just everywhere.
It's in the air.
It's a great analogy, like Eckhart Tolle said. It's like asking a fish what water is. It's everywhere. It's here. It's like
yes. One last question. Any funny Jon Anderson story you could share?
A friendly Jon Anderson story.
Or a funny one. How is he as a band leader? He has this kind of cosmic kind of thing going on, it's
Jon, he was all right. He actually, frankly, relies a lot on others to fill in the blanks for him.
Oh, sure. That's true with Yes as well. They'll just show up strumming an E chord and they'll build a roll around it.
Sort it out. I guess I'm thinking of a funny story about Jon traveling with him. I remember a pleasant story. It's not necessarily a story or funny or not, but the rehearsals for that tour, when a house, he rented when we got to America to do the American tour, he rented a house on Mulholland Drive. And it was right down the road from, I think it was Warren Beatty's house or something. It was an interesting neighborhood to sort of get in and out of. It was pleasant because it was all sort of, it was a nice house. It was all landscaped out and everything. There was a pool, so we could swim whenever we wanted to. A particularly funny story doesn't come to mind. But, but good times,
Absolutely. Wow. Great stuff. Great music came out of it, so that's what really matters.
I remember playing that when we did that animation tour. I remember we played the Palladium in New York City. And that place was sold out. People were very excited to see him and to hear that some of the Yes music again. And I remember we played really well. It went down great.
Does a show playing that music have a different vibe than, say, Sting or Peter Gabriel?
Yeah. That's a very different thing. There's a lot more. There's a lot less room for interpretation.
True.
There's a bit of room for interpretation with Sting and with Peter. Absolutely. I remember I came up with a part in a Peter Gabriel rehearsal. There's a song called Family and the Fishing Net.
Yeah, on Peter Security album, I think.
2011 has this really funky line in it. Doom, 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 doom. And there's a part, and then I came up with this key. It was like a counterpoint to that with a string sound, like a chord. And my part was dun, 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 dun. He's going boom, 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 boom. And Peter heard it and like wigged out. And Tony too was like, yeah, that's fucking hip, man. Let's do that, So little moments like that happen. You're not rewriting anyone's song, but there are little spaces like that to add some touches and interpretation and still be within the song. But it's enjoyable whether it's a space for that or not. They're just different kind of gigs.
Sure, absolutely.
More like
with Anderson, he's always kind of a cosmic character. He's I think Rick Wingman said that Jon Anderson's the only person that's trying to save this planet while living on a different one.
Who said that? Rick Wakeman?
Yeah, Rick Wakeman. Yeah.
Oh, that's rich. Wow. That's I'll just say he's not wrong.
Yeah, well, I think of it as kind of a cosmic avatar.
He definitely is in his own space, John.
He's channeling some cosmic mojo, and that's kind of you'll go into a Yes show. You walk out of there almost like you just walked out of church or something, where it's more than just a rock concert. It's kind of a spiritual event, and I suppose the best shows are with anything.
Yeah, exactly, they are.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning.
Thank you, man, for having me. It's a pleasure. It's really
thoroughly enjoyed it. Come back anytime. And I will be back next Saturday night with a fusion group that is founded by the drummer for a jam band called Humphreys McGee, who are kind of not quite Fish, but they're the next bracket down. They're back in arenas, they're filling 1,000-seaters, and playing whatever they want, and that's always the best way to do it. And this is kind of imagine jam band meets Return to Forever. That's what this they're called. Kick the Cat. So Kick the Cat will be my guest next week. So if you like fresh fusion, that's the stuff to check out.
All right. All right.
Great meeting you, David.
And you too, Jez. Really enjoyed it.
Your thing.
Okay, man.
All right, guys. Stay safe and
take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. All right. Good night.